Good morning, Eugene. How are you?
Good morning, Jana. I'm great. How are you today?
Fantastic. It seems like summer is a million miles away at this point. We've done our back to school refresher for anyone who missed that. We've also done a piece this week on the third parties that are going into your children's school for any parent or teacher who's watching. So, for those who haven't tuned in, my name is Gianna London, founder of the Natural Women's Council, and Eugene Garvin is a retired director of an engineering firm who does much of the research for the Natural Women's Council. One of the hottest topics, which is very near and dear to my heart, as well as many people in the Women's Council that launched this campaign in January 2023. Geez, nearly 2 years ago. Are the library books, the sexually explicit library books, which are in the children's section. So that's a hot topic we're going to cover today. And I'll turn it over to you, Eugene, to kick it off.
Yeah, thanks, Jana. So, to kick off, the first thing we wanted to talk about is an article in the Guardian newspaper, actually, and online. And they kind of go through the story in the UK where people are complaining about these books. They're the same books, right? So, there may be some ones we haven't seen, but in general, things like this book is gay is on the list there. So we'll post that article. People can take a look at it. It's just kind of tell you the same things are happening in the UK. And one of the YouTubes later on is going to tell you the same things are happening in Scotland. So we're not on our own here. So if somebody is telling you there isn't inappropriate books in the library, they're gaslighting you.
Mhm.
And we get into that now as we talk about it.
Mhm.
So initially, we were just going to talk about the Guardian article and do a quick reminder on our own situation. But then we saw this notice from Forsa that was appearing in the libraries talking about keeping the library workers safe, which is fine, and I don't have any issue with that. And there shouldn't be any abuse of library workers. These are front end employees, and at the end of the day, most of them may not be responsible for what's appearing in the library, so people have to treat them with respect. So we don't certainly sanction any kind of abuse against library workers, and that's not our approach in terms of the library campaign. But they do make some points, I guess, and I think we have to debunk those points.
And
So
Eugene,
if we
for
look at
anyone who
the,
doesn't know who Forsa are, just to let our listeners know,
yeah,
Forsa is the second largest union on the island of Ireland and by far the largest trade union voice in the Irish civil and public service. So they're a union, just for anyone who may not have heard of Forsa.
yeah, correct. Thanks for that. And Forza basically was the coming together of three different trade unions that happened back in 2018, and that made them the largest civil service trade union at this point in time. And we'll just flash up the different groups that they cover, so you can kind of see that background. So yeah, so it's a trade union and it's trying to protect its workers. Now, there's a context here as well, which maybe before we get into it, I should give, and it's in the context of pretty well any trade union on this island. There is an affinity and a kind of a support there between the trade unions and the lesbian gay movement, which is very historical. It goes back to the miners' strikes in the UK and the kind of support between the two groups at that time. And it's important to understand that. And that's deep seated. So a lot of people in the trade unions here in Ireland would have a huge level of support for the kind of LGBT movement. And I can understand that. And that's fine. However, I think there's something else going on here, and that's which is not what these guys were advocating for and supporting each other for in the past. So there's something else going on in the modern day LGBTQ plus movement, which is a political movement now more than anything else. It's not a human rights movement, even though it claims to be that. So let's talk about the points they make. So they talk about spreading rumors and allegations about the nature and intent of some books. Okay. So we're going to show you the books and we'll read from them today. We're not just going to flash them on the screen. We're going to read some of the text. So if there's little ears in the room, you probably want to get rid of them because we're going to actually read out some of the text in these books because people need to hear it. Um, they're suggesting that there'll be an increased risk to children and young people posed by the books. So again, you'll hear what's in the books, and you can make your assessment as to whether these books are appropriate for 12-year-olds. They're arguing that libraries and books in question have a gay agenda. I'm not necessarily arguing that they have a gay agenda. The main issue we have is that the content's just not appropriate. It's not appropriate to any child,
And
regardless of
and
whether
um,
they're,
Eugene, if I can just jump
yeah,
in, when RTE
yeah,
did the primetime piece on the new type of protest and they featured the library campaign, I made a statement for that documentary, and it's very clear that this campaign that we launched is not against the LGB community. This was about the content. And also for our listeners, it's really important to note that many of the books that we found that were sexualizing children were books that were not in the LGB section. They were in the heterosexual or another section in the library. So this is not an issue with the gay community at all. This is, as Eugene said, about the content of the books, sexualizing and indoctrinating children. And I'll quote from the Children First Act shortly, where you can see that it's clearly in violation.
Yeah, yeah. And the other point to make, and again, people falsely accuse this campaign of wanting to censor books or have books banned and this kind of thing. Again, that's gaslighting. There's nobody asking for that. The only thing we're asking for is that the books are put in the appropriate section of the library, and the library is policed so that children in the 12 to 17 category can only access books that are appropriate for that category. That's the thing we're asking for. We're not asking for books to be censored or books to be banned.
We're asking the content to be moved out of the children's section, but we also caught the libraries giving children a library card that allows young adults, as they say, as young as 12, to access the adult section. So although some of the libraries are moving the books, they're allowing the children to access the adult section. So we have two requests: get them out of the children's section and stop the children's library card from giving them access to adult material.
Yeah, correct. And I guess a point we should make, and again, you'll see it when you look at the books are actually targeted at children. They use, line drawing images, etc. The tone of the books is targeted at young people, young teenagers, people in that 12 to 17 category. It's pretty obvious when you look at them. So the people who produce these books do have an agenda, and they talk about falsely claiming that. No, the people that sponsor these books, and we know them, the multinational groups, NGOs that actually sit behind these people, do have very aggressive agendas. Mm-hmm. And they have even more aggressive agendas for the younger cohort, which we haven't seen come into our libraries yet. But we're going to see that when the primary curriculum changes in the coming years. You're going to see a whole load of books for the younger groups, which are all going to be focused about transgenderism, etc. Because there's thousands of videos and books of those that are out there. So
we did cover one little book called Fred Got Dressed, or Fred Gets Dressed, and that shows a little boy, and it's for 0 to 4 years old. The little boy whose mom cross dresses him, puts makeup on him, and then he runs off with no underwear on, wearing a dress. So we have already seen those coming into the Irish libraries as well.
Yeah, we have. And there's a point here falsely claiming these books in some way support grooming of children and young people. Well, again, let's talk about the content. And I think, Jenna, you want to talk about the Children's First Act. Let's read it.
Absolutely. I'll pull up the Children's First Act for anyone that wants to hear how this violates. So on the Children's First Act, which you can find on the tusla.ie website, under the sexual abuse section, there's a point in there that says, it is sexual abuse if you are showing sexually explicit material to children, which is often a feature of the grooming process by perpetrators of abuse. Another point says it's sexual abuse if you are exposing a child to inappropriate or abusive material through information and communication technology. So that's sexual abuse. And then there is also a piece under emotional abuse as well. A point under emotional abuse says that showing seriously inappropriate expectations of a child relative to his or her age and stage of development is emotional abuse. So we feel these library books violate 3 points on the Children First Act. They are not ready for it, for their age and stage. It's inappropriate. It's sexually explicit. And it's abusive material. So it really violates the laws we have on this island to protect children.
Yeah. And we do realize, and it comes under the context of queer theory and the views that people have who hold a kind of a queer viewpoint. They kind of deny childhood innocence. So they have no issue exposing children as young as 12 or even younger, they believe. And we see it. It's in their writings. It's in the writings of people, of the queer theorists, that they have no issue with this. And queer theory also has an inherent support for underage and intergenerational sex. And again, we're going to show you a video later on that actually aligns with this. And you can quote from the queer theory books,
Mm-hmm.
from Michel Foucault, who was an advocate for underage sex. You can check it up. We'll show it to you on Wikipedia. So people say that this is propaganda and misinformation or disinformation. This is the truth. These people are gaslighting us. And why are Forsa doing this? Why are they taking a position that's anti-child? Like, that's what they're doing here. So we want to call that out.
Mm-hmm.
We've no issue with frontline workers, and we do not uphold and support in any way people being any sort of aggressive language or approach to the workers in the libraries, and things like recording them, etc. That's inappropriate. These are staff doing their job. They shouldn't be getting recorded.
And if anybody wants to see the campaign that we launched nearly 2 years ago on these library books, it's on the naturalwomenscouncil.ie under campaigns. You will see the library tab, and it shows exactly step by step how we launched the campaign, including being professional and polite to library staff. Simply go in, look for the books, serve a notice letter, and follow up with an email specifying the content of those books. It's very quick, it's very peaceful. We do not condone violence, but we can't control how everyone around the country handles this and how they, go in on their own. We can't control other people's actions, but, just to also explain that we've been at this for 2 years trying to get these books out of the children's section. It's justifiable that parents are starting to get angry now because children are being harmed.
Yeah. And they talk about posing as just concerned parents or members of society. These are parents who are frustrated. These are fathers who are irate when they see the content of some of these books. Now, they're behaving inappropriately in terms of, being aggressive to staff. I accept that. But this is not a far-right activist campaign. Again, they're gaslighting you.
Mm-hmm.
So these guys shouldn't be doing that. So,
not at all.
And when I talk about queer, we've talked about queer and queer theory and the new political identity that is queer. It has nothing to do with gay and lesbian people. Let's be really clear about that. And again, they conflate that. This is typically the way the left conflate language. They conflate gender and sex. They conflate the word queer, which has two different meanings. So let's not get caught up in that. Queer theory advocates for underage sex, advocates for the sexualization of children. It believes it has no issue in doing that. And we have plenty of material that supports that. It's in the queer theory books.
We will be writing a letter to Forsa, and we will be sharing all of the content of the books we have a concern with, so they can't say they didn't know about the content.
That again, these articles from people, and again, misappropriating, misrepresenting, talking about people trying to censor books and ban books. There's nobody advocating for that. This is a misrepresentation that's happening in the media because they don't want to talk about the real issue, the content of the books. So we're going to talk about the content of the books. Let's take a look at them. This book is gay. It's got the Healthy Ireland label on it. Let's take a look at through some of the content.
And just Eugene, for listeners who haven't followed us, Healthy Ireland is part of the HSE, the Health Service Executive in Ireland, which for anyone watching from the UK, it's like the NHS. So these books are endorsed by our publicly funded health service. Eugene, you said that it's very colorful. It puts it in kids' language. So whoever wrote this book, which is Juno Dawson, I believe he used to be James Dawson. He's a man identifying as a woman. He used to be a teacher. He thinks it's child-friendly to write about a good handy, a bad handy, blowies. So he's trying to put it in what he feels is child-friendly language.
Yeah, yeah. So have a read. It talks about blowies. Oral sex is popping another dude's peen in your mouth. Talks about handies and breakfast eggs. All men like their blowies served in different ways.
Yeah, and
if
we go to the page on the sex app, I would ask, how many parents, whether you have whether it's gay or straight, it doesn't matter. This is not about sexuality. How many parents would be happy with your child learning how to use a dating sex app called Grindr, where your 12-year-old will upload their picture of themselves onto the app? The app will work out your child's location and tell them how to meet the nearest homosexual adult in the area where they can chat to them. And then point number 5, they can meet up with them. So your 12-year-old child meeting up with an adult using a sex app. Is any parent really okay with this?
Yeah. Yep. So, the rest of the book, it's all in this way, and it's written in this way. It's written in this kind of child-centric way. So it's targeted at a younger cohort. So let's take a look at the next one. The next one, the Trans Teen Survival Guide. Now, this one is actually particularly an issue. It's another Healthy Ireland one, talking about injecting yourself intramuscularly. You could kill yourself doing this.
Mhm.
And it's covered in a separate video that Jana, you went through, which was the expose video, which talks about when you engage the HPRA,
Yes,
because
yes.
the HPRA, yeah, the Health
The
Products
nurse,
Regulatory Group.
Natalie, a nurse in the Natural Women's Council, contacted the HPRA. She talked to doctors there. They were very concerned about the book. They didn't believe it was really out there in the public, teaching children that they can order hormones and puberty blockers online, and pictures like this one here on how to inject their young bodies with the drug. However, their concern was quickly put aside and dismissed. When we got to the end of it, they did nothing about it. They perhaps maybe did engage the HSE, Healthy Ireland, or the Department of Integration and Minister for Children, O'Gorman, and it was dismissed. And that book is still on the shelves for your children to learn how to inject their bodies.
If some parent has a child that gets harmed because they uh, got this book, ordered this stuff over the web, because again, you're talking about taking in an uncontrolled substance from
Mm-hmm.
God knows where,
Mm-hmm.
attempting to inject yourself. You could kill yourself doing that, or
Yep.
do serious harm to yourself. And that's why the HPRA exists, is to stop this
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing.
Yep.
And if somebody is harmed, I think a parent would have a case against the state for compensation
Absolutely.
for negligence, and
Mm-hmm.
this is criminal negligence. Let's be honest about it. This is criminal negligence. Does
Mm-hmm.
anybody think this is acceptable?
Any parent with an ounce of common sense should not be comfortable with their child getting drugs on the internet and learning how to inject those drugs. I mean, I wouldn't
Yeah,
even give my child a vitamin without reading the label.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's just it's madness.
It's totally inappropriate. Now let's get to the next book, and this book is not an LGBTQ book, as you mentioned, Jana. This book is a sex for all book. It's like a sex encyclopedia,
Hmm.
and it's for teens, right? And if you look at the content of the book, it's got BDSM in it. It's got everything in it, to be honest. It talks about breast augmentation, and it talks about all the sexual positions. Like, it's like a who's who or a what's what of sex, basically,
So again,
including
is any parent listening, no matter what side of the fence you are you okay with your 12-year-old learning about bondage and submission? I wouldn't
yeah,
be as a mother.
yeah. This is sits in the adult category, right? This is top shelf stuff.
Hmm.
So why is it being put into the sections for 12 to 17-year-olds, or being made accessible by 12 to 17-year-olds? So let's call it out. For the record, all of the following people below have demonstrated that they have no problem with these books or any other books that are similar to them, because there's plenty. There's lots of other books. We didn't talk about genderqueer and other books like that
I think there's
being
300
accessible
books,
to,
Eugene, on this reading list, and we've been through many of
yeah,
them. This is a very small percentage just to
yes,
show people content, but there's over 300 now on it used to be the Rainbow reading list. Now it's
yeah,
Pride or some name. They have rebranded their reading list, but there's over 300 on there now, right down to age 0 to 4.
yeah. So let's look at all the people who don't have an issue with this, that think this sort of reading material is acceptable for 12-year-olds. The Minister for Children, Roderick O'Gorman, the Children's Ombudsman, and TUSLA. So no wonder we have a problem when all of these people don't have an issue with it. They're not upholding the Children First Act.
Mhm.
I'm sorry. Force the
Tusla,
trade union, the large,
if Tusla and
yeah,
O'Gorman don't have an issue with children going missing and being trafficked and 14-year-olds found in a brothel, well, are we surprised that they're okay with these books?
yeah. And also our mainstream media, the journal.ie, the bastion of misinformation, the Irish Times, the RTE, the HSE, responsible for health with their
Mhm.
Healthy Ireland list, the HPRA, as we mentioned, and many others. We're just listing out the main people that were engaged.
And
The Garda,
don't forget Garda Síochána. I went in
the Garda,
myself, and
yeah, yeah,
Linda from the Natural Women's Council went in, and we have 5 pulse reports, reports that were opened by the Garda because these books violate the Children First Act. They opened the pulse report, did the investigation, but called us back and said it's not a matter for the Garda. So they're allowing child abuse. And the other thing, Eugene, that you can show on the screen, which Linda has a copy of, is the response in writing from the Children's Ombudsman when we sent them some specific content in the book. They dismissed it and said it hasn't harmed a child yet or something of the sort. So we can share that letter on the screen as well to show people what the Ombudsman has replied with.
There's a problem here, and that this is indicative of a problem in this country right now, where our government and civil service seem to be at opposition with the people of this country. And this is clear. There's no respect for children here. There's no respect for parental rights here. So people need to inform themselves, and we're going to cover some relevant material in some of the other sections as we go through today's session. But this is an indictment of these people, and hopefully in years to come, because I think there should be a Dáil inquiry on this in the future. I think it's going to be needed when we've got a new regime that will actually represent the people of this country and actually has some consideration for child welfare.
This is criminal. What's going in front of our children's eyes is criminal. There's no way around it. You can't dress it up any other way. And another message for Forsa: if you think your library staff are victims because we're going in concerned about the books, you need to look at who the real victim is. And the real victim in this is the children.
Yeah, this is a blatant lack of respect for children. And we see that in queer theory. It's not acceptable. We're calling it out. It's nothing to do with human rights. It's nothing to do with gay and lesbian rights. This is a different activity that's going on now, and we want to call it out and highlight it. So let's move on, Janet. This is we're being gaslit here. That's what's happening. People are not focusing on the issue. They're focusing on people who've been aggressive in the libraries inappropriately, and that's fine, and I accept that. And that's not the way that we advocate for engaging in this. So I'm not going to take any responsibility for people who've done that, because that's not something we advocate for.
No.
But what's not being discussed here is the issue. The issue is children are being exposed to inappropriate material, which would be unacceptable in any other way. Like, these books cannot be read out on primetime television or primetime radio, because they're considered unacceptable.
Exactly.
To do so.
One thing, Eugene, I'll just, our readers, if you want to hear the letter that I sent to RTE when they wanted me to come on the primetime show, which I refused to go on, I won't give them my time, but I did send an 8-page right to reply, and I included in the right to reply details and copies of the pages from the books. So if you go to the Natural Women's Council YouTube channel, you can actually hear the letter I sent to RTE, which they dismissed. So RTE is in violation of their own child safeguarding by knowing about this material and not addressing it, not reporting on it. RTE has dismissed it, and they have pages of the books as well that we just showed you.
Yeah. Okay, so this is so guys, you started it. We didn't start it. You started it. You brought these books into the library. Now, again, for people, our viewers, this has happened in every other Western European and North American country. This has happened in the US. It's happened in Canada. It's happened in the UK. This same thing has happened of bringing in these library books. And we'll give you an example later on. We saw it in the UK there. We had the article. We'll see an example from Scotland later on. So bear with us, because we're not the only people getting this. But that's not in any way letting any of these people off the hook. That these people are not looking after our children. They do not have our children's best interests in mind. One of the founding documents of queer theory was produced by Gail Rubin, Thinking Sex. And within that, she has this kind of circular system. We covered it in a video before. We'll throw it on the screen here so you can see it. And it's got this kind of outer limits view of sexuality. And, you know, the sky's the limit, basically. Intergenerational sex, sex with multiple partners, sex in multiple places, sex with objects, sex with animals. And this is basically what was in this book in the Children's Library in Scotland. So in one sense, you know, we've been complaining about some of the books in the Irish Library. I'll really say this book takes it to another level. This one is actually, it's you know, the top tier of diabolical books that can be exposed to children. Totally outrageous. It comes from queer theory. It comes from Gail Rubin and people like her and Michel Foucault. who had this extremely liberal view of sex. Michel Foucault, he was a huge advocate for underage sex. In France, he wanted the laws in France to actually be changed to allow for that. So these are the people we're talking about here. So, and I've no qualm saying it because, as I said, queer is not gay people. Queer is a political position. The straight people are queer. Most of the people who are queer are straight, actually. They're not gay at all. And they're destroying the LGBTQ movement at the moment. They're dominating it and they're destroying it. So
They
I think
hate families and they hate childhood innocence. Just remember that queer theory. They hate families. They hate our childhood innocence. So that's what they're trying to break down.
yeah, like the definition of queer is it's a political position that's in opposition to the norm. So anything you might consider to be normal, queer will want to do the opposite to that or tear that down. And unfortunately, something like childhood innocence is in its path. This is a very interesting video. It's 22 minutes long. A guy called Derek Jensen, who's an eco-philosopher, an eco-warrior. He's a leftist, very much a leftist. I probably wouldn't agree with half the things that Derek Jensen talks about, to be honest. But he has a huge issue with queer theory for the very reasons we've been discussing. And he's in a room here with students, with college students, with leftist Antifa college students, discussing his issue with queer theory and specifically referencing the support within queer theory for pedophilia or the advocacy for it. And the fact that you'll never see anybody on the queer side oppose pedophilia. You'll never, and this comes up in the actual video. Listen to the video. He quotes from Gail Rubin. He quotes from Michel Foucault. He quotes from Judith Butler, all the main queer theorists. So it's a very aggressive video. There's a lot of bad language in it, so listener discretion is advised. You'll hear a lot of unhinged young people in the background shouting transphobe, etc. at this man when he starts talking about this, because they don't like what he's saying.
They do get
Which is the
triggered,
same.
Eugene, when we're talking about protecting children. I've had a trans right activist throw water on my head. He was just in court and pleaded
Yeah.
guilty for that. They melt down when we talk about protecting children, and they get very angry, very aggressive.
Yeah, and you'll hear an absolute meltdown. If you want to hear that in life, like, do you want your children to end up like this, having this kind of a crazy meltdown and not accept the truth? That's what you're talking about. So, a very educational video. Listen to it. And this guy's a leftist himself, and he's absolutely open. He's hugely into the whole eco thing, and he would sit firmly on the left, but he has no time for queer theory. He sees it as a huge issue, and that he basically emphasizes that this oppositional position that queer theory takes to normality is a huge problem. That's not appropriate. That there are things that are normal in this life that are normal, and that's the way we should be living. And to be promoting some sort of oppositional position to them is crazy, and pedophilia is one of those. That's it, Jenna.
Great. So that was a great discussion today. So much going on, but that catches us up after our couple weeks we had off for the summer. So now we'll continue to do our weekly wrap up on the hottest news of the week. So for everyone that listened, thanks for watching. If you found this beneficial and you think it could help other parents and teachers out there on what's happening in society and to our children, please do share. Again, if you can just hit that like button and give us a comment, give us your feedback, we can beat those algorithms. And like, share, and subscribe. And if there's any stories as well that you want us to cover, please do email us at info@naturalwomenscouncil.ie, and we'll be happy to include them in our weekly wrap up. So thanks everyone for listening today, and we'll see you next week.